Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar on future-proofing your startup and getting sustainable investment. I'm Claire from Peace Future, your moderator for today. So just a reminder, for our Japanese guests who need Japanese translation, please click on the globe button below to select your preferred language. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put in the Q&A box below and we will answer them after the discussion. Okay. Before we start, let me give you a brief introduction of Peace Future for some of you who may not have heard of us and for the very first time that you will be joining us. We are an intellectual property investment bank in Asia, focusing on identifying and unlocking hidden value of patents from IP-rich corporations and seeding them into startups to use for open innovation purposes, to grow new businesses and ideas. Some of our corporates include Panasonic and Nokia, and we also focus on IP monetization strategies and investment advisory. We developed our in-house program, IP Hatch, for startups to look deeper into tech patents on offer and map it into their business model to build out real-world solutions. So startup will be awarded with the patents and mentorship, intellectual property advisory, exclusive access to the corporates, and real connections to continue their startup journey. For those startups right now, they're here, they're interested, please feel free to go to www.iphatchday.com to learn about this opportunity. Okay, so for today, we will be embarking on a very important and challenging topic to tackle planet's toughest problem with guest Afinia from UNDP Accelerator Labs, and from Asian Development Bank, Carlo from Gobi Partners. He's not in yet because due to some connection issues. Hopefully he can join us in time. And lastly, Jason from Peace Future. The COVID pandemic has definitely acted as a strong trigger to reshape global economies and how business operate. So by exposing the fragility of the current businesses and economic models, it has forced the world to hit the reset button. So definitely a growing number of businesses are acknowledging this threat and finding ways to protect their interests with different stakeholders. So given these scenarios, it is no doubt that ESG, environmental social governance, is built into business model to build resilience and future-proof startups from further shocks. So ESG is definitely gaining traction and is an important strategy to optimize business. We have definitely witnessed many significant developments through growing number of funds in this area, disclosures, and building new community. Peace Future ourselves, we have definitely also changed and adopted new practices to incorporate this into our program and our stakeholders. So without further delay, let us start off today's webinar by having our guests to introduce ourselves. So shall we start off with Afinia from UNDP Accelerator Lab? Can you give a brief introduction of yourself, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Kay, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Afinia Suranat, and currently I'm working as the Head of Exploration at United Nations Development Program, or UNDP in Thailand. And here I'm leading the UNDP Thailand Country Office portfolio on two aspects. The first one is on private sector engagement, focusing on sustainable business, private finance, and impact investment. And the other aspect is on innovation, and in particular on supporting the government in their digital transformation journey, trying to explore and apply new innovative solutions to address development challenges as well as to improve public service deliveries. That's pretty much in a nutshell what I'm doing right now. I'm very pleased to be here to share my experience and to learn more from everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Afinia. Next, can we have Anne from Asian Development Bank?
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you for having me at this webinar. I work for ADB, which is a finance institution, international finance institution that looks at the development in Asia and the Pacific. We work in emerging markets around the region, everywhere from Armenia all the way to the island states in the Pacific, and from Mongolia to Timor-Leste. So it's a vast geographic area. And as you can imagine, digital economy development, everything that has to do with tech startups, is very much important to the economic development of these countries. And we see interesting dynamics as in that there are nodes of development with certain cities standing out You may have seen the international rankings for startup ecosystems. And many of the countries that we look after, that are our partners, struggle with their strategy around startup ecosystem development. So that's been one of our focus areas. We take strong interest in the challenges that startups face, that they struggle with in the context of digitalization, in the context of the pandemic. But we also want to look at the opportunities and really emphasize that in terms of how governments can set themselves up to do better in supporting startups. That's been my focus at ADB, but we also look after many other topics related to digital technologies in my team. That much should suffice. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I believe there will be a lot to be discussed today. Since Carlo is not in yet, maybe Jason, can you give an introduction?
Thank you, Claire. Hello, everyone. I'm the founder of Peace Future. I'm very delighted to be here along with the two distinguished speakers to be touching on this very, very in-trend topic about sustainable investments and also how to future-proof your startup. Why we came out with this topic is because we have been engaging many different ecosystems for startups and also speaking to many startups. They are observing that there's this trend in the market on looking at sustainability like ESG or SDG. Some of them do not really know how to pivot their model or even include that into their business. And I hope this panel could shed some light for you, those relevant startups or even businesses to actually embrace this new movement globally. And I believe this movement will definitely be very impactful for the global markets and in building a better life, as well as future-proof businesses. So I'm looking forward to speaking with the rest of the panelists, and hope you guys enjoy this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. All right, so I think let's just dive straight into our discussion. I think for today, the discussion will be really breaking into two parts. Firstly, really helping and sharing with the startups here how we can be more sensitive towards global trend, planning their business model, and actually leveraging these advantages to create and gear their business models to new heights. Also, we will also be thinking about how SDG, social development goals, can help to diversify the objectives in their businesses and attract new sources of funding. So the first question that I would like to pose to our guest here will be, there will be more and more buzz centered around impact startup and its intentionality. Is it enough to just be purpose-driven? What ingredients are needed to build impactful startups? Let's start off with Afinya. She's from UNDP Accelerator Labs. I believe you have a lot of experience with startups, especially in Thailand. Maybe you have some thoughts on this?
Thanks, Claire, for the questions. And personally, I think for impact startups to be successful and truly sustainable, there are what we call 3 Ps, and that they have to consider and take into account as they are building their business. And these 3 Ps that I'm talking about are people, planet, and profit. And if you look at this element, you can easily see that it is not enough to just be purpose-driven or profit-driven, but you need both. And actually, companies can achieve both purpose and profit without the need to compromise the other. And if you look at the leading business around the world that adopted social enterprise business model, like Tom Chu, Grameen Bank, or Better World Books, and so on, those are the examples to show that business can really do well while doing good. And in fact, business can have a positive impact on environmental, social, and economic aspects by focusing more on the sustainable operations. And on the other hand, they are also depending on these surrounding aspects from the environmental social aspect for their license to operate, or even for their business to grow, to be successful in the future, right? And for me, I think, there are several factors that you need to take into account as you are building your impact startups. The first one is clarity and conviction around your mission. We often find social enterprise tend to, sometimes go overboard, a bit too broad, and are looking at, like they want to address all existing problems in the world. So the clarity around your mission is very, very important here. And you should really ask yourself that before even starting a business, why you are doing what you are planning to do. Because I'm sure that many of you here may also be in the situation where you are not profitable from the beginning. And you've been struggling for long days and tiring days, operating without making any profit at all. And that will come to you, with a strong determination, strong commitment that it will help you pass through that challenging period. And the second one is that when you're developing a product or service, especially for the impact startups, it is very important that they have to creating a solution with their target audience, not just for them. Because those beneficiaries are the ones who know what exactly that challenges that they are facing. So that by co-creating the solution with them, it will also help you better understand the challenges that you are trying to address. And the last one, if you are really into creating social and environmental impacts, I think that you really need to understand the problem that you are trying to solve within a very, very deep way, and some kind of system literacy and a deep understanding of the system surrounding the challenges that you're trying to address, the communities itself, the issues that you are dealing with, and want to create impact on are super essentials. Because as you know, like every single issue, like for example, if you take climate change, for example, it's not just environmental aspect. It's really involved the social, the economic lens. And that's why if you try to understand the problem from the system lens, it will really help you trying to navigate and find the solutions that better address the solution itself. So that would be my 2 cents on sharing on your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafinya. That's a very, very good insights that you have given us. I mean, definitely to help you to summarize for the audience, especially our interpreter. You have touched on really important points like being targeted, precise. We really have to try to solve the problem from the deep, in a deep-rooted way, and create this with the stakeholders themselves and not just for them. I mean, that's very, very important. Next, Mary Ann, you have other comments to make?
Yeah, Finya really did a great job. More than 2 cents worth, I would say. So let me maybe just underscore a few points that you've already made, Finya. Intentionality alone, no, it's not enough. If you want to be an impact startup. But not everybody wants to be an impact startup. And yet, this framework that we're talking about when we say the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, is actually a framework that anyone should read. And, as a citizen, as an informed person about politics, whatever it is, just read it, look at it. It will appeal to you in many ways. It covers pretty much everything about human life, your environment, social, all these different dimensions. And then what I would request you, if you're a startup considering this framework, is not to pick one goal, which is often talked about. Look at your business model, pick 2 goals, put them on your website and say you are contributing to these goals. I would request you to not do that, but to think about how your business, how your idea is relevant to this whole framework. And then if you see that something really might be impacted by what you do, fine, pick that out and make your pitch. But do think about the rest as well. Let me give you an example. If you are into fishery products and you work on marine life, you might do an excellent job at addressing one goal. But all your waste products that go on land are really polluting, just as an example. That doesn't really help us with impact and overall sustainability. And it is a little bit of a cop-out when it comes to the SDGs. So we need a whole, very all-encompassing look at your work if you want to really, truly address sustainability. Another thing I want to say, and this is something I heard from a colleague who was working in Japan. I know we have a Japanese audience. Apparently, it has become very trendy to wear that little SDG button in public. I'm not wearing it today, shame on me, but it is a label. It is something that has become popular. And thank God, when I was working in the United Nations, this was one of our goals. Let's make this really well known. Let's make this very popular. That's great. And it's a good start because people start talking about it. But really what I would love is if more people looked at it more deeply. You can't imagine the rigor that goes into this framework and the amount of targets and indicators that sit beneath these 17 goals. There's a ton of information there. and it will help you actually ask very important questions about your products, your solution, or your team and how you work together. So that was just a little bit of flavor on top of the really great answer that Afinia has already given.
Thank you so much. And definitely I remember the button that you said that we can do and where maybe Jason can consider doing this for his stuff.
Yeah, I really want to find out where can I get the button.
Yeah, so next, Jason, maybe your turn to give some insights into this.
Well, I think most of the very important points Afinia and An has already shared. Definitely, I'm just taking some notes and a lot of thoughts went through my mind. And I believe many of the startups that are with us today would also feel the same way, you know, where exactly their startup is standing and what kind of role are they playing in this the world of sustainability. I think they covered most of the point. I would just want to say one practical way of what you guys can do in reviewing your own business model is really to sit down and really look at your value proposition. Like An has said, there are 17 goals. In fact, it is so broad, all right? But a lot of times, startups fails to kind of put their thoughts together and ask where they are actually impacting or what are they doing wrong. I mean, most of the time they're just focused, how do I get my valuation up? You know, how do I actually get to the unicorn status? But in the current state of the global trend, the whole thing is that investors are looking beyond that. There are more and more impact funds. There are funds or mega funds starting to turn towards sustainability and saying that this is one of the main PCs. I was just reading one article the other day that mega funds, the big ones like BlackRock, Vanguard and all that, they are starting to put a lot of emphasis in sustainability. And how does that translate to the future? I mean, that will be really very, very impactful, because when the big funds are moving that way, means that a lot of things are going to be prepared for, you know, having such pieces in their investment targets. And for the startups, I think one good thing to start off is really to look back at your business model canvas, look at your value proposition, see how you can reorganize your company to contribute to one of the 17 goals that is stated by UNDP. All right, and then start to, you know, even inform, maybe of the founder, discuss with your team, ask them what exactly can you actually do to impact one of these goals or many of these goals. In fact, when you look at it closely, you probably find 2 or 3 that is relevant to you. If you're in the tech space, you find that, you know, the smart cities and all that will be relevant. There's also many other points that you can actually pick. And also it could be ideas, so-called, you know, it can inspire you to have new ideas for your business model, because too much of time we look at how we generate revenue, but it may be more fun and more purposeful and also fruitful when you actually add some of these goals into your business, and it will make your whole entire startup journey more fulfilling. That's all I want to share. And please tell me where I can buy the buttons. It'll be fun.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, definitely. Jason also mentioned a very critical point, trying to track where the funds move, because I think a lot of people want to have access to international capital and, you know, definitely funding for your startups. So that's also one of the ways you can appeal to investors globally. So let us then move on, you know, to the next discussion points that I've actually written. You know, startups often wonder, you know, with all these good suggestions that you have given, how could they start? You know, how do they align the pieces together to draw a strategic picture, given, you know, there's 17 goals, there's so many different areas that they can do in the ESG arena. So I know there will be different ways they can equip themselves with knowledge and strategies. Maybe you guys can name some to get them started. Maybe Afinia, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. Actually, for this one, I think, well, Anne already covered some of the point that I would like to answer in this question on the SDGs. And I think everyone know that, ESG is a big topic today among business investors. And actually, there is no consensus on the existing list of issues, and different schools define the list of ESG issues and their materiality differently. So for example, under environmental itself, issue could range from climate change, carbon emission, all the way to natural resources, use, energy, water management, waste, pollution, and so on, right? On the social itself, it could be on human rights, workforce health and safety, diversity and inclusion. So if the question is asked like how they can, start thinking about integrating ESG lens into the business, well, I often tell the business that, the best way to look at it is to look from the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals, because the SDG itself could be used as the overarching framework for the companies to share, to communicate, and report their strategies, goals, and activities. And actually, as Anne mentioned earlier, that when you look from the SDG goal itself, it's very broad enough to cover all the development challenges that are existing today. No matter you are working in developed countries, rich or poor, everyone are facing the same challenges, and all these have been captured by the Sustainable Development Goals. And for me, I think if you apply the SDG framework, it can really help the business with a new lens through which to translate the world pressing issues into the business solutions. And these solutions will, at the end of the day, help companies to better manage their own risks by minimizing negative impacts, and also maximizing the positive impacts that they are creating on the people, on the planet, and also anticipating new consumer demand, secure access to limited resources, and also strengthen their supply chain. And at the UN, we have several tools that we develop. Like, for example, many of you may Google SDG Compass by the UN Global Compact. This is I would say it's a basics tool that if you would like to integrate the SDGs into the business models, it will guide you through several steps, and it's very easy to read. You might not have to come from the development world to be able to understand this toolkit, but it's very easy to read and to navigate and to start thinking about how you can adjust your business models to become a little bit more impact oriented, and how to integrate the SDGs itself into your business operations.
Thank you so much, Anfia. I believe such toolkits will be really important and relevant. I think a lot of startups would be good to know, where to get these toolkits, which website to go. I think later there's I'll ask you guys, which is a good platform they can actually join. Okay, I see Carlo, you are here. So we also have Carlo from Gobi Partners, a VC. I think he's a little late because I think there's some power outages just now. So maybe Carlo, you want to start off with just a brief introduction of yourself first?
Sure. I can't really say anything, but just saying my apologies for. I guess that's why we're future proofing sustainable investments. Even just power right now is unsustainable. So here I am, a bit late, but just to introduce myself, Carlo Delantar. I'm the head of circular economy for Gobi Partners. Gobi Partners is one of the most active VCs in the Pan-Asian region. We have about 13 offices. My role focuses on the Philippines, but in the region, because of my expertise on circular economy and supply chain, I look for sustainable tech really in the region. But so far, because circular economy fairly at its infancy stage on what it could become, I'm covering global deals at the moment, but it's an exciting space knowing that our thesis is that Asia is the manufacturing hub of the world. And if we are going to design sustainable tech, we might as well start from the source. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlo. I mean, now we're in the second question, so I will just repeat the question. Maybe you can, chip in some of your, your expertise and also some of your thoughts on that. So I was actually checking, asking other panelists, startup usually wonder where to start and how to align pieces together in the vast expanse of the ESG arena. So what are the different ways they can actually equip themselves with knowledge and strategies to bring to their business model? Maybe Carlo, I'll just ask you straight from here first, then I will then move on to other panelists.
Sure. Yeah, I think on that front, the lowest hanging fruit of startups that are currently in the meta, I guess that's the hot topic this year, but the meta of what's happening in ESG, most of them are actually coming from more of the social entrepreneurship point of view or background, origins, mainly because social entrepreneurial tech scene is fairly focused on one, social impact, but also looking for ways to actually not create more unnecessary harm to the world, right? Whether that's over society, it could be on policy governance side and also the environmental side. So I would say that would be the lowest hanging fruit. But now seeing the changes with investments as general, whether that's LPs, corporate offices, conglomerates, especially publicly traded companies, they're really looking for ESG opportunities to align with their values and what's governed by specific policies in the region, because there are incentives. Even we can even talk about green bonds and whatnot. So because of these underlying opportunities, this therefore creates more supply over a long period of time, for especially for startups that want to create viable solutions in this space.
Thank you, Sir Carlo. I believe there are definitely a lot of funds that are involved, and startups can also find different ways to research on these funds and tap on them. And Gobi Partners definitely will be one of the very good partner that they can look for and also share some of their business ideas with. So next, maybe Ant, your turn.
Yeah, on this question on how can you hone your skills and how can you kind of refine your thinking on impact, I think one way that many startups do this is through hackathons and through competitions, through calls for innovation. And there's actually a ton out there. And maybe if you yourself, your startup, aren't quite ready to do that, just looking at those and understanding what others are doing, how they're pitching their business models, how they're pitching their overall strategy, all that is very interesting learning material. And it'll get you ready to engage on the topic. There's quite typical questions that a panel would ask a startup. Have you considered? Have you thought about this? So these are learning questions. I think that's a very good way of starting. Also, of course, the tools that are available and that the UN has put out there, excellent material. And then I think when you look at the big development banks like the World Bank, ADB, and so on, what we do is more looking at the finance side. We have a new vehicle called ADB Ventures that invests into impact startups, so similar to what Carlo is doing. And what we are prioritizing, the topics we're prioritizing, and that maybe others are also looking at, like, for example, the future of food or the future of education. There is tons of publications out there that would be looking at trends and that are essentially foresight products. I do a lot of work on strategic foresight. I think that's a practice that is not common enough in the startup scene. That is working with scenarios and alternative futures, asking the questions of what if, because sometimes you discover real gems of opportunities through asking what if XYZ happened, and to question also your assumptions that you have about the future, where you're kind of stuck in a rut because you think you know how things are going to be. But if you question those, you sometimes discover that there are new developments, new trends, new signals that could be amplified quite easily through an event. Take COVID. What has that done to our environment, to our societies, and so on and so forth? I don't want to say you need to predict COVID and the next COVID, but you should engage with this kind of work to discover opportunities. And a lot of that is in the sustainable development space, in the space that we're talking about when we say impact, because the future is about these big trends, and we need to take care of some of these big problems that you alone won't solve with your startup, but that you can contribute to. It's very, very complex space to be looking at sustainable development, but it all breaks down into little pieces and little business models and problems and services and products that you could address as a startup.
Thanks, Aaron. Definitely, I think what you've mentioned is also very important. It's just like how you are learning any new things, questioning, asking what if, trying to learn from your peers, other people's business model is definitely one of the ways you can increase your knowledge in this area. So lastly, we have Jason. Any comments from you?
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I think the rest of the panelists have highlighted a lot of information where startup really can start, to kind of gear their startup towards sustainability. I have another angle which I would like to share. Is more from the technology angle. I hope actually there's a lot of references out there in the market. You can look at university publications, look at what are the universities trying to do to solve some of these problems out in the world, and also the corporates. There are a lot of corporates now turning their R&D towards more sustainable solutions. If you are a startup, you do not know where to start. There's a lot of materials you can actually get from the public. You can search online for patents that have been filed by multinational company. You can do a search on any companies that you would like to kind of replicate. You may want to find out this tech company, what kind of solution are they working on for the past 2 years, 3 years, and looking at the trend of those technology that they are moving in that are relevant to sustainability. These are all good ideas that you can tap on. And a lot of times startups don't do that. Why? Because it's not a known thing for a startup to do research on what the MNCs are doing, and it's usually the MNCs. So the question is, why does the MNC always have new technology that they are coming out? The reason is because they have been always doing all this landscaping, understanding the university's movement, and internally they also have some R&D roadmap. So I would like to encourage all startups, right? Take this database because most of them are free. All right, seriously try to do kind of a landscape and find out what these big boys are doing, because you do not want to recreate the wheel, but maybe you would like to complement what they're doing. And that will also help you to be more targeted in terms of your technology development, and in terms of, when next time when you find investor, you also know how you can pitch your company according to that. And by looking at all this information very strategically, you are not trying to replicate many other people's similar business model. You may be creating your own unique impact, serving one of the goals of the SDG, and definitely will be more strategic, and you will not go around, in circles, trying to find your unique proposition.
Thank you, Jason. You can definitely share, some of the databases that you mentioned about in the chat. If any of them are keen, they can definitely go and check it out. Yeah, to move on, I think a lot of us have heard of this line, impact, not monetary gains, is our true measure of success. I know there could be some overlap. I just want to know that, since you guys have been working with startups very frequently, I think many would have given you some ideas on how they actually have this resonating with their business. Maybe Afinya, you want to share some thoughts on what you've heard so far on this tagline?
Yeah, thanks so much, Claire, for the question. And actually, this statement could not be more true, because this is what I've been advocating for among business, like in Thailand, throughout my career. Business often think that their only measure of success is how much profit they make. But actually, in fact, it's much more than that. And that's why we have today's discussion, right, to talk about impact. It's also very important. With the rise of ESGs and many other factors that we discussed earlier, we're looking at the company performance. Investors and stakeholders are starting to look beyond financial data, and also to focus on non-financial data and performance of the companies. And for business to be able to operate sustainability, I think you need to understand your business process and have a proper risk management plan. And all this can be done through setting up what we call the impact matrix and starting having an impact management framework in place. By doing so, it will allow you to go beyond just simply understanding, but really to enabling you to determine the gaps and ways to address them and improve your business over time. And for those who might not really be familiar with the concept of the impact measurement and management, the impact management is the process of measuring and managing the creation of social and environmental impact in order to maximize and optimize the impact that you are creating. And by having an impact management framework in place, it will also help you in terms of decision making to make it in line with your mission, increase your effectiveness, accountability, and also transparency. It also allows you to clearly communicate your impact to external stakeholders, which in turn could further attract new funding resources that you might not be expected from the beginning from the aligned partners. And more importantly, I think by using the impact metrics, it has also becoming kind of like a new trend among investors in the market. And more companies are trying to tracking their overall contribution to the SDGs through using the impact lens to track it. And this makes it even more crucial for impact investors, from the funders, to have a clear understanding of your impact strategies and measurement so that they can make a proper comparisons between your business vis-a-vis the other businesses have the same product, have the same solutions, but then they can use the impact metric as another criteria to make a judgment and compare the companies, which one they want to invest in. And for those who might, sound that, maybe the first time hearing about the impact management, I would highly recommend you go through the website and search for what we call Impact Management Project, or IMP, because since 2016, IMP has been gathering and consulting with over 2,000 enterprises and investors around the world to build a consensus on when we talk about impact, how to measure it, how to manage it, and establish a framework. So if you would like to, establish the impact management framework for your business, you might go to check it out at the IMP website. It is a great starting point for those who are really getting into this field of work. And
Thank
also
you.
at UNDP, I think I forgot to mention this. I have to say something about UNDP as well. So at UNDP, we also been developing the tools to support the startups, the social enterprise, or even business to do impact measurement and management, building on the IMP framework. So if anyone here is interested and would like to explore further, I'm more than happy to share the tool that we have, because it's like publicly available and you can use it for free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jafriya. I think that's very good. I mean, very insightful for our audiences here to know about the matrix. I hope, the VCs or not even just the startups are using the matrix to, quantify this when they're evaluating the startups. Maybe Carlo, next, maybe you want to share if you are using that and, some of the comments that you have.
Well, here's a counterintuitive thought. I come from a nonprofit social entrepreneurial space, so the restrictions of actually growing to scale with regards to impact becomes the priority rather than scale, and sometimes it's counterproductive. However, hearing a lot of talks of one of the pioneers for just creating business for the purpose of good is Patagonia, like Yvon Chouinard. And every time I listen to his keynotes, the first thing is would be, why are we so obsessed with growth? Is capitalism man-made, and how is that becoming an important metric to actually grow any organization? What if we sort of flip the switch and say, what if we just need to maintain every single year and just be content with it, right? You're not taking out jobs, you're sustaining impact, you're sustaining the amount of manpower you do. With innovation now, you can definitely increase the productivity and efficiency, thus creating more impact with less, right? And this also sort of applies to the environmental aspect side as well. And I felt like with that notion, just taking ourselves out of this completely exponential growth mindset, for some reason, in my mind at least, coming from a nonprofit side, we were beholden by donations all the time, and then all of a sudden, I'm now in a different seat where I'm managing funds now, and you get to see that there are so many options on how impact can actually be sustained, whether that's through funding all the way to just not growing at all, right? So I think there's definitely a lot of options that are available, but the apparency of where those are available is still not really clear, especially for entrepreneurs that don't have any clue where capital can be applied for, right? So and that, for me, I think this is where the grit of an entrepreneur really kicks in, is at any given time, whether their startup is dying or their startup is growing at a trajectory that's like only a couple people can actually just dream about, is where they come when it's everything sort of just nothing, right? And I feel like that's where it's definitely a sobering thing, because you get to see how a person's disposition when it comes to impact. Is it a second priority or is it the top priority? And when the conversation about compromises come in, you get to see the values of that person kick in, because when stripped away of everything, all intricacies of just creating an organization, you realize at the end of the day, it's the leadership and the culture that really makes or breaks what we compromise for impact. I went on through sort of like a tangent of philosophical, yet also on just like the journey of like investments and creating an organization. But I think with that thought, I think there's always this conversation about the grass is greener on the other side. It's not really all about money all the time, but it's sometimes on the side, it's also not about growth all the time. But the question is, where is your sort of like strong line where you don't want to cross? And for me, it's really impact, right? If somebody tries to compromise impact, or at least tries to flirt impact and sort of make that as like third priority, then it's pretty easy to because most of the time their disposition, when you ask about what do you think about impact, are you going to compromise, where do you, most of the time you get to hear a tone of the startup or a founder where their priority is. And sometimes it's disheartening, but at the same time, that's where you get to see which investments you can actually have confidence in.
Thank you, Carlo. I definitely think that, striking a balance is very important. It's always a fine line that we don't cross, between compromising impact or finance both ways. Ant, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think the startup on its own being asked this question, the answer may often be, we are definitely for impact. But the startup is not on its own usually. When it goes on a growth path, it needs investment, and there is expectations from the funders. And so it depends a lot on the partners, I think, that you have, and surrounding yourself with the right kind of investors that give you a bit of a long view and not an immediate boom expectation. Because oftentimes the kinds of subjects that people work on when they have a solution or a product that is focused on a sustainability topic is more of a difficult, complex issue. It takes more time. It might even involve more R&D, and it might be a space where not many people have gone before. And so that requires partners that have to take a long view. And once that's there, I think then you can have that balanced view of impact and monetary gains. And I think this, you as the hosts here with the IP topic, is very interesting to weave that into the conversation, because when you work with IP that you take from a corporate partner that has kind of put it aside because it's not really delivering the kind of scale that they're expecting to, the profits that they're expecting to make, but they are like amazing innovations at times that are just sitting on the shelves. And how can you deploy that into something that delivers a sustainability objective is a very interesting question. In that space, can you look more, because you have taken something that somebody else has already developed, you're jumping ahead, you're winning a lot, you're making up time. And so does that give you, with your investors, a bigger opportunity, bigger space, bigger runway to actually then take your time and focus on impact and really address something very large versus maybe somebody else who is maybe adapting just a solution that you've seen in another country and you're contextualizing it and making a lot of money quickly because you can just kind of copy paste and make money on an app. So I think that this space is so vast that it depends a lot on the context. But yes, I fully subscribe to the ideals that we should focus on both. No business is sustainable if it doesn't think about the funding or the income. And at the same time, if you're in the space and you're constantly ready to compromise impact, then you're not really, you're not really in the space. So that's my random thinking about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Arndt. Thanks for the insightful comments. I think all three guests have really said quite a lot on this balancing, compromising and making sure the right partners are there. I think Jason, just a last bit from you, quick comments.
Yeah, I have to thank Anna for his comments about our model that is trying to bring out those very valuable inventions from the corporates to enable them to have a second life, to make impact for the world. I guess I really agree on that point, because it is true that you save a lot of years of R&D rather than trying to start from scratch. And the whole entire idea, between impact and business, how you should balance. One of the output and the very obvious output is also intellectual property. How you also is able to ensure that the world is able to use this information effectively and also with fairness. And in the world is a very controversial topic whereby IP is deterring innovation or whatever. I have, of course, I'm more positive on IP because the IPs that are registered now in all the patent database are valuable, super valuable information that all the scientists have leaked to the world, and you should actually use that information effectively. And for the corporates, the IPs that they have, they spend millions of dollars developing that. So just to give you some examples, I think in our platform, we have seen startups that are taking on the multinational companies' IP and building on top of it, generating new IPs. Is really helping in sustaining what has been spent before and making new impact to the world. So we have a startup that took on some battery charging technologies to deploy in rural area for solar solutions in villages that are not connected to the grid, and they are creating new business model to help them to grow and access to education and also to all the basics of life, using low power appliances and all that. Those are making very, very positive impact, and actually they are leveraging on those charging technologies from Panasonic in this case, and the startup is called Soinite. And we also have startup called Trinity Eco. They are very much looking into the ESG measurement and recordation, to look at all the small medium enterprise, how they can embark on this journey and embracing more ESG values, and also getting themselves SDG ready. They are adopting solutions from Nokia and helping to make more of a positive impact to the small medium enterprise who are behaving very different from startups, because they are just SMEs making a basic business, and those are also very impactful. This company we had on board our program since last year, and they are called Trinity Eco. And it's very exciting to see how these guys are using and reusing the technologies from the multinational company. So to wrap up, I believe the balance is definitely important. The output from all this is also very important. This is something that I would like to leave with the audience.
Thank you, Jason. We have come to definitely the last 10 minutes of the webinar session. For anyone who have any questions, I will urge all of you to write in the Q&A box below to ask all these distinguished guests any questions that you have. So I think let's just touch on the last question on the investment part of things. So how can we get investment strategically and continuously? How can we do so? So maybe we started this off with Carlo, from Gobi Partners, since as an investor.
Yeah, I mean, give you an idea. The first $1 billion pledge fund for women startups, we pledged $50 million, and we completely deployed that with a deadline from last year. We are currently announcing our ESG report real soon, so watch out for that. But this is definitely where Where for us, outside of what we see in the region, we do see that with the lack of natural resources already, innovation and tech become a way more valuable asset long term. Outside of that, we're already seeing the issues with supply chain at the moment, right? And for us, it really just boils down to how fast it will happen. I mean, if we're talking about the environmental crisis, it's always at the edge, at the brink of things almost getting to disaster, where we sort of like flip the switch and actually do better for the world. But I don't think we should wait for that. I think we've gone through a lot. I come from the Philippines. We got hit by a typhoon, and every single time it's just rebuilding, rebuilding, rebuilding. But I'm sure there are better ways of doing things. So for on that sense, with our region, with the Pan Asian regional strategy for us for the 13 offices, every single week we have weekly meetings, figuring out what's happening in the region, making sure all our startups take our ESG surveys, but also make sure every time they do a funding round, we make sure that it's aligned with our ESG framework. And I think that's what's exciting. Also a challenge, mainly because exciting because we get to see more different angles of how our investments actually are beneficial for these startups. But on the other side, we get to see how startups are adjusting towards the requirements of an ESG based or ESG driven VC. Definitely, it's taking a longer time than we would expect, but I think sooner or later, as you know, with Moore's law, it takes a while for acceleration to grow, but when it does, it's just gonna break free. And I think that's what we're waiting for, and we're super excited. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carlo. Afinia, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, sure. For me, I think it's all about like being agile and willing to adapt to change when things go wrong, and willing to take risks in the face of uncertainty, right? With the COVID shock, I think everyone see that, you have to be like, be resilient and be ready to pivot, ready to change, to make sure that your business model still stay relevant to the changing context. And I think this is very important because the world is changing. So you have to be ready to change, and you don't need to stick with the original business model that you planned from the beginning, because most of the time you can see that, as you go along the journey, you have to keep changing to make sure that, you still keep searching for the product market fit and keep changing your business model. And as today, as Carlo just mentioned, like now investors, they are not only looking for profit only, they're also looking with the ESG lens. So to make your startup still stay relevant and still keep attractive to the investors, ESG become a new factor that you have to take into consideration. And that's why I think, to make sure that you'll be able to get investment continuously and strategically, that means you have to stay relevant, and to stay relevant means that you have to be ready to change.
Yes, that's true. Thank you so much, Afinia, to be agile and be ready for changes. Ant, any last thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm thinking that there is maybe a strategy to look for packs of investors, for like people who like to co-invest. I've seen this happen, definitely for us in ADB Ventures. It's an important thing to look out for what others are doing, what kind of deals they're looking at. And once you see that trend, and you look at the groups of investors who often come into deals that are similar to what you're doing or that you find attractive, study that more closely and maybe reach out to those investors, because there seems to be just beyond also ESG investors, just others who are inspired by certain stories, who don't yet have that flag that they're ESG investors, but who can kind of tag along. So I think that helps. Also, I think on the startup side, look for your peers, look for others who are in the space, and maybe have more conversations with them about where they are pitching, who they're learning from. Some of the products or solutions are actually best offered in tandem or on similar platforms. So there's a lot that one could do to kind of see both at the income side, where you sell your products and offer your services, but also on the investment side where you can attract a continuous flow of finance. I don't think there's real rocket science there yet, but I think some trends that you can pick up on. And in terms of overall, also on the last question, I kept thinking about this. I think what we really need is not like small anymore in the space. We actually need some very big startups to come up that make a difference. And that's what's so amazing about this growing trend, because we need the best, biggest unicorns to be sustainable. And that's still a tall order, because going from niche and social impact to unicorn status is a big move. But I think that's what we all jointly should aim for. The next Uber should not be focused on driving. It should be something about bicycling or whatever it is. I mean, really, you name it. Doesn't need to be this corny example, but why not, right? And once that hits, things are hopefully going to look better. So scale is important, and for that, profit is also important. I wanted to footnote that on the previous discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Arndt. Yeah, that is definitely true. I also read some articles that the next 100 unicorns will not just be search engines or social media companies. They will be sustainable, scalable innovators, startups that definitely help to decarbonize or make energy transition affordable, these two.
Circular.
Yes, circular, correct. Yeah. Jason, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, as the topic of this panel is also about future-proofing your startup. One of the points that I earlier highlighted is, look at what the corporates are doing, look at what the universities are doing. Definitely, there are many references that you can actually do, because if you want to get continuous investment, you need to continuously, like what Vinya said about pivoting your model, you also need to continuously innovate. All right. The whole thing is about how you innovate to, address what Anne has just said, to take the bicycle instead of cars. Then there are a form of innovation. And I believe there are many people around the world coming out with new ideas, inventions every day. And these are very good references that you can actually take on, and also even try to replicate what they are doing, but, in your own unique way. So one of the starting point, I always like to give startups a starting point, what you can do. Take the closest company or big company that you really admire and see what they want to do, and ask yourself how you could complement them, or even be very different from them. You maybe say, oh, I really think this is going to change, the way the Meta is going, it may not be the right way. And you may say, okay, I want to go the other way, which is maybe I want to go more the AR way, the AR real world, more augmented reality than virtual reality. So I guess these are things that you can start off, and technologically, like I mentioned, you can reference to technology that are filed by companies. You look at what their movement is. They will often add some scenarios in to tell you where they want to apply it. Such information is very valuable because it tells you what's coming up next. Just to give you an example, many of us are using the Apple Wallet, and the Apple Wallet is actually patented by Apple many years ago. And if you imagine I've came across that patent maybe like more than 10 years ago. And I know this kind of mobile payment will be widespread. And thanks to COVID, we are very much on really touchless kind of payment now. So ask yourself what kind of impact you could actually create from new technology development. And if you're following innovation, if you're creating new innovation, you will definitely get more and more strategic investment. And if you're continually innovating continuously, you will be able to get the investment that you need to make more impact to the world. And probably the next unicorn that is more focused on sustainability. That's my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Jason. Yes, we have now come to the end of the webinar. I see that there are no questions from the audience so far. I believe all of you should have a very good understanding from, from all the panelists. I see that, Ant and Afinia and Jason, I think you guys have put some links on the chat box for everyone to take a look. Feel free to definitely click onto these links for all the startups out there. Okay, once again, I would just like to thank all the panelists for your time and sharing all your great ideas and insights, and all the attendees for tuning in today. I hope all of you have a good session and you have some key takeaways for your business. So thank you so much, and I hope see all of you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Afinia. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Carlo. Thank you,
Thank you.
Claire, for your moderation.